it's unique in that I didn't create it. A sales meets money podcast, so I can flip it into some kind of sales methodology and make more money out of it and get more deals out of it. I did it because I didn't want to have a salesman on my tombstone, and
Right.
that I wanted to have a little bit more meaning, and really I'm 11-0. No one's turned me down to be on this podcast, so it's been a great opportunity to extend the network and talk to people that are also interested in doing the same kind of thing. Maybe not, exactly, but tangentially in the least, and then put me in touch with others that might want to talk about it as well. So it's been a great opportunity for me. You're my season finale.
There
So
you go.
don't worry, there's not going to be a to be continued part one, two, and three. We'll just,
Right.
we'll
Right.
just knock it down in this one. Um,
Okay.
so yeah, I want to we'll go ahead and kick it off and start rolling here. This is Sales Intersection Season 1, the finale, episode 10. I have my uncle Kevin Jones, who is the Joe Dimaggio of successful startups. The winning streak just continues, and I think there's kind of a spectrum in sales where it's there's high meaning, low sales, and or high sales, low meaning. You've kind of gone through the whole spectrum in your life, where that maybe it was more focused on the sales and less meaning in your life, and flipped
Yeah.
maybe around the kind of inception of SoCap.
Hmm.
So why don't you, however you like to do these things, start it off with telling my viewers a little bit about yourself, but specifically that point that point where things changed and it became more about meaning and less sales, and then where you are today.
Sure. Thanks, Eric. Um, well, I had done, I guess, 6 businesses, and when I hit it fairly big back in the heart of the .com, and sold my business to a public company, turned out to be 10 days before NASDAQ's peak and 17 days before it fell off the cliff, and my sales conditions were was in a bidding war, and I told the 3 companies I wanted the most cash, the least stock, and the shortest earnout, because I didn't know that the boom was about to pop, the bubble was about to pop, but I knew
Yeah.
people were paying too much, and that the my previous businesses had been in Mississippi, which is there's never been a boom in Mississippi, at least not since 1863 when Grant handed his sword to Pemberton at Vicksburg. And they've been down a long time. And so I got out at a good time, and I was doing another startup, and just kind of what I did, whatever. And I've done events and media businesses all through my career, starting in 1975 until 2000 when I sold. And my daughter said, Dad, why are you doing this? Because I get kind of obsessive when I'm doing a startup, and she'd lived with it for most of her life. She was 20. And she said, you don't need the money, and you proved you can do business outside Mississippi. All the other businesses have been in Mississippi until I moved out to Silicon Valley and did the .com thing.
Yeah.
So you don't need the money. You proved you can do business outside Mississippi. So what's your life about? And I had this thing of being at a laptop monitor, pulling down my life uh, menu, and what it's about had not been, it was a box you couldn't check anymore. The last time I checked that box was in college,
Uh-huh.
and then I just sort of done interesting startups and solving problems and things. So I went off and tried to be on a nonprofit board, and that was a lot of consensus, uh, slow and incremental decision making, and serial entrepreneurs and slow consensus are not really made for each other. So I decided I'd go do something, in the developing world, and somehow I got started a project to solve malaria in Swaziland and Mozambique in southern Africa. And about 2 years in, I realized I was the last guy that was going to solve malaria. I finally kind of figured out what the problem was and what could be done about it, and I was not the guy who was going to solve it. And I so I stumbled back to the States and didn't know really what to do. And a guy I'd been hanging around with before on a thing called Social Venture Partners. It was a pooled giving kind of thing. Said, well, let's start a fund in these new things of social enterprise. And I just kind of heard about social enterprises, business created to make money but solve a big problem. Like sub-Saharan solar panels in rural Africa. It's actually a really good business. Kerosene costs. Solar costs 40% less than kerosene, and kerosene kills about 1 million people through indoor air pollution. So those sorts of things, but also in the US, fair trade, literacy. And you can often make money and make more impact than you can by purely giving, because you're not dependent on foundations. But you could actually make your solution sustainable by finding a way to build a product or a service that people can pay for. And there were a lot of those businesses around, and they were having a hard time raising money. There was no funds at the time to do those things. So they were trying to rope together angels, and it would take 3 or 4 years, and they would have a lot of dream management. Every angel would have their vision of the world, and just founder would get diverted. So I said, well, let's do a fund to solve that problem for them. And then I realized that actually it was in Bill Gates' office that we had our epiphany. We were wanting to invest in a fair trade coffee company from somebody who'd been one of his direct reports. So we got in the room, and he stood up at 16 seconds in and said, "Stop. I don't want to hear any more of this. This hurts." And he said, "Look, I have 2 pockets." And he patted one pocket. He said, "I have one pocket that's my business pocket, my investment pocket. I wanted to put all the money in the world in it. And then I have another pocket that's where I do good things, and that's my foundation. And if you say there's a link between them, you have to leave." And we got kicked out by 2 other billionaires. They let us go 15 minutes before they couldn't handle the idea. So I realized, they didn't want to be around the idea, but they'd want to be around the reality. So we got all the funds that were doing this new social enterprise business to solve a problem that could make money and return money to investors. And we got all together and we made an event about it. And we didn't confront them on the definition. We gave them a big festival-like experience. So they were kind of overwhelmed. Everybody said it felt like drinking from a fire hose, and that was what we wanted. We wanted them to know that it was big, real and big and growing, and we wanted to change the dominant paradigm of our customers, and that was the thing that was different about the sale. Because usually you just sell what your customer wants, and in Bill's office we realized what he wants is wrong, and we were in those other 2 billionaires' office and realized what he wants is wrong. So we wanted to change the way they thought about investing. And so, we helped create the category of what's now called impact investing. And it's, hundreds of billions of dollars or so, but you had to think differently about it. The old way is I invest for returning, and I'm justified in being selfish and just thinking about me. Milton Friedman is the classic example of an economist at the Chicago School who said, the only social responsibility of a business is to make money for the shareholders. And we said, no, the dominant way of thinking, the Chicago School is what it's called, is completely wrong. And it enables rapacious capitalism that can pollute the world, cause climate change, and feel good about it because they're generating value for shareholders while they're making the world uninhabitable. So we said, no, you have to think about investing for good. And now that's become a big thing. The business roundtable, huge companies, JP Morgan, et cetera, says we have to be around about stakeholder value as opposed to just shareholder value. And stakeholder means, who do you impact? What's the community you're part of? Who are you responsible to? And so we helped catalyze that. And but we had to start venture capitals where people can accept new things in investing. So we tried to change the way of thinking about venture capital. And we and a lot of other people, and luckily there was enough people to gather. It was kind of a Whoville problem. Nobody was paying attention. We gathered everybody together, and like the Who in Whoville, people heard us. So the message got out, and then it get replicated.
Yeah, and it seems like you had kind of a niche
Yeah.
play in a lot of these, where Rosalie would take care of kind of like the operations, and
Yep.
someone would take care of what would you take care of? I mean, would you take care of the original reach out? Would you take care of the
Yeah. I would.
translation?
I would find where we should be going.
Yeah,
If you're imagining, making your way through a jungle, I would climb up to the top of the tree and look above the other trees and say, oh, that's where the path ought to go. So I would know where to go, and I would find enough traction to get the first money in the door and the first customers to validate the concept. And then my wife Rosalie would be the one who actually productized everything and built the business. And I'm the visionary, and for a visionary to be effective, you have to have people who tell you no. We have three ways that would happen. I could bring in all the wild horses, and she would say, "That's a wild horse we can ride right now. That's great." And then she would say, "Oh, that's a wild horse that needs to be in the pasture for 2 or 3 months to just kind of get acclimated." Said, "No, that wild horse will conflict with our stallion." And so I was able to do that. She reads budgets, she does the spreadsheet, she manages staff. I point the way, I get the first money in the door, I tell the story. I build lots of big partnerships. One of the kinds of, my brother is a math mentor, or he was when he was a teacher. And there's 8 kinds of math thinking, not just arithmetic. And there's a certain kind of math thinking, one of those 8 that I'm turned out to be really good at. And it's finding the highest value with a partner. Like, I could find where the best deal is that you will say yes, and you can imagine how it's going to be good for you, and I can imagine how it's to be good for me. It's finding that, the place in between where we build something. So I built a lot of those good partnerships, and I bring them in, and sometimes Roland will say, "No, that one hurts. Take it away."
did that and that does that come natural? Was that come through? Did you figure that out and you had to kind of study it? I mean,
Well, we've been working together since 1975 in business, and we had a couple years with her father. Her father was about to sell the family weekly newspaper, which is in the poorest county in Mississippi, which is where she's from, in Itawamba County in the Appalachian northeast corner of Mississippi. And we met out in the Bay Area, and so I said, "Well, let's go back and try. How different can it be to be in the poorest county in Mississippi from the Bay Area?" It turned out to be quite different. So I learned to listen to the market because I couldn't understand anybody. I mean, I had to learn, how things were encoded culturally, how they were encoded historically, how they were encoded in slang, in body language, just to cover City Hall of the newspaper. And her father was my guy. He was really the second father I hadn't had. And he said, his job was to build a business where he built a community where his business could survive. And so that became the way we did it. And so I was really, in simple ways, I was Mr. Outside finding the new stuff. I would wander around, figure things out, make things happen. And the things that should replicate and grow big, Rosalie would do. And she didn't really like being out there. And I have a lot more risk tolerance than most people, and a lot more tolerance for ambiguity. And so I can explore a long time and finally come back with something. And she likes, when it was real enough, she would say, "Okay, this is a thing I can," she said, I will widgetize it, is what she would sort of say.
yeah.
Like, I will make it a widget.
I mean, yeah, and I mean, you're a genius in a sense of, I mean, like IQ tests down to your performance track record. We can get into a lot of examples. What do you think you've gotten away with because of being a genius in a lot of different of these examples, where a guy like that was 20 points slower on the IQ scale would not have gotten away with?
Well, when I went to work for a big magazine, when I moved out to California, I was not sure whether, a guy from Mississippi could start a business. So I went to work for a tech magazine that was covering the internet and business, called Interactive Week. But I went in, and they had me using Lotus Notes on the first day. And at noon, I emailed the admin, and I said, "Look, I'm not going to use Lotus Notes. I'm going to use just a pop email account." She said, "No, you have to." And I said, "No, look, I'm going to be a star. I'll be able to break the rules. This is the first one. And so I announced to them that I was going to be a star, and that I wouldn't recommend that. I mean, on your first, well, it was actually the first morning. It was before lunch. I just hated Lotus Notes. It was incredibly restrictive. I said, I can't do this.
Let's talk before I want to get into right now. I think the current focus is faith plus finance. Is
Yeah.
that before I get into that, I'm not sure how many times a week you get invited to these podcasts or webinars or whatnot, or 30 minutes where you have to speak about the host's agenda mostly. But
Right.
if you had to turn it around and you got to create the agenda of not only today's podcast, but some a lot of these that you're getting invited to make it most sexy to you, that what would you like to be talking about right now? What do you feel should be talked about more right now?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, one of the things I'm really working on, and I'm not sure how this relates to a sales podcast, is that I think we need to be working toward a localized economy of interdependence, because the economy of rugged individualism that treats your grandmother as a expendable human resource is killing us. So I'm working on lots of ways to make that happen. Friends and family funding for entrepreneurs who don't have a rich uncle, that we're creating in Asheville. A church credit union network to get capital based out in the Black churches to places where there's not a Black bank with a credit union behind it. Other things like that. I mean, I think that we have to destabilize the rapacious capitalist economy, and you can't tackle it head on. You have to let it sprout up lots of places. And the things I'm working on and the things I'm highlighting is that our events, we're also highlighting things like that are showing up in another place. There's a community investment trust in Portland that lets people invest in their local businesses and to keep them away from the hedge funds that want to flip them, and especially now that people's rents are coming due. But you can invest for only $10. I'm seeing that replicated in 2 other places, also in Seattle, also in Atlanta. So there's a new economy that is taking the money away from Wall Street, keeping the money local, and letting local people get involved to save the economy, especially in COVID. We decided we're doing this friends and family equity fund because nobody needs any more debt right now. They have all these loan funds, but that means you need to pay them back, and you don't need to take on any more debt if you don't know when your customers are coming back. So we're giving people equity to give them a couple of years run rate, and then they can go back and borrow. So I think lots of ways that we need to preserve our economy in the pandemic and preserve small businesses, because I think there's hedge funds that are just going to want to gouge out our main streets, just like Walmart gouged out southern small towns and replaced Main Street and Court Squares with just the strip mall out on the highway with Walmart and whatever else is out there. I think we're in a similar thing like that. We have to preserve our economy during and post COVID.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned, I don't know how this has to do with the sales podcast, but I think everyone's a salesman, and what you're
Mm-hmm.
doing is you're selling ideas.
Yeah, I am, exactly, and then I'm getting them replicated.
Yeah, and so I mean, even Heidi, your niece, my sister, she's she doesn't realize it, but she's selling ideas too.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to bring those universes together.
Yeah. Well, I can sell new ideas. One of the things I've discovered, when we had our first fund and it was doing well, and was getting decent investment return and decent impact of metrics, I said to my partner, I said, maybe we could scale this thing. And Tim said to me, well, that means replication. I said, okay. He said, no, Kevin, that means doing the same thing again. Oh my God, no, we won't do that. So you have to know where you fit. Being an entrepreneur is more sexy than it should be now. Most people should be employees. Being an entrepreneur means you sort of obsess about things and you're willing to take more risks than are reasonable. So you have to figure out, are you an early markets person? Are you a mature markets person? I can go in and figure out the pattern in an early market before other people, and then be on the right block at the right time when people get off the bus, and I sell them my hot dogs, and I'm the first on the block. I've
Yeah.
been on the right block early, and so you have to figure out where you are in the market, where you are organizationally, where do you fit, where are you at home. You know, most people should not be entrepreneurs.
And you also have the convenience of, I mean, you made it big when it was more about money and
Yeah.
less about meaning. What do you say to those folks that have that want to make it about meaning right now, but they don't have the resources and capital because they didn't make it big in those first 4 or 5 startups?
Yeah, and that's a hard thing. I mean, more and more people are wanting to move toward meaning because they realize that, this economy doesn't care about them, and succeeding in this economy doesn't give them the satisfaction that they want. So, I'm curating a cohort of neighborhood economics entrepreneurs, and I've got our friends and family fund in there, but a lot of things that are a little bit earlier. So, I'm doing that. I'm helping these people evolve in a peer network. We have a 30-minute call every Friday where we just say, what you're accountable for this coming week and what's your dream. And then every other Thursday, we have an hour and a half where somebody in the cohort presents and we help them and we go further with it. So, I think I'm not sure that's a replicable or scalable model. I'm willing to do a couple more of those, finding other people. But I think, ideas move forward when they're nurtured by more mature entrepreneurs and when they're peers. So I'd love to see about replicating that whole model of a mature entrepreneur with a cohort of some kind of way. I might, I mean, we're only in our 5th week and it's working really well. But I think, this could be a templatable model. But everything I'm working on things that can replicate. It could work in
And
my town and work in your town.
and in the last 4 or 5 ventures you've had, are you coming to them? Are they coming to you, and you're picking the team, or what's?
Yeah, most everybody has reached out to me and asked for some help. And I said, well, if you want help, we have this thing called the Field Guide to Transformation, which makes sure that we're all on the same page. And we look at, what's the system you're in? Where's the system broken? Who are the players? We have some players that you need in the system. We need a system entrepreneur that's moving the whole thing forward. We need a finance ninja. We need a storytelling evangelist who will open the door to power and money for you and let you come in. All those sorts of roles. We need a mother hen to shepherd the small relationships while the system entrepreneur moves the whole thing forward. And so we help them figure out, this is, you're running into this barrier because you don't have a mother hen in that role. So everybody's being really helpful. So the idea is it could be a replicable model, but it's nothing that's early days that we're just figuring out how it works itself.
Yeah, I got you. And what's what's kind of that prohibitive list? I mean, what's if I will not do this if
Yeah.
this specific type of personality is on the list, or this?
Well, no, I mean, there are a lot of bad ideas that keep sounding great to people, and one of the things is a day laborer marketplace. I've seen that win 3 times in mashup competitions, in hacker competitions. And the problem is that day laborers have no recourse in a marketplace. And so they always turn into some version of, what is it, Emily's List or something. And there's another one where I'm going to let people have more decisions about what's good, about what they buy when they're in the Walgreens aisle or when they're in the Target aisle. And I've seen those fail about 6 different times. And it turns out that adding this level of analysis to your buying of soap or laundry or aspirin, nobody likes it. Everybody likes the idea. It makes sense to everybody, but nobody uses it. And so when I had a really nice deck come over last week for one of these things, is, well, we're different, And I said, how? I said, well, we're going to be smarter. you know, but you know, there are bad replicable ideas. So I try to say, look, you know, here are the 8 failures who've done what you're doing in really intelligent ways. One guy, Darryl O'Rourke, took in 8 million on that idea, and it just doesn't work. So you know, you have to say, do people really, if you want to do a behavior change, do people really want to do that behavior? And if you're putting 2 behaviors together, are those behaviors people want? I did the same kind of thing. I was an investor in a fair trade chocolate company, and we did great. We put in $1.5 million, and we exited at 21 million. But I thought people should also want to invest in their supply chain. So I had these little cards, and they set up this whole hoop fund that you would, you know, when you're going to the chocolate, you would look at this and decide to invest to. Well, it turns out you're putting your analytical prefrontal cortex next to an amygdala function, which is where chocolate, sex, drugs, gambling exists. And so it's like bringing your mother-in-law when you're trying to have an affair. I mean, it's just, it doesn't work, you know. And so the 2 parts of the brain hated each other. I lost $250,000 of other people's money on. Everybody loved the idea, but everybody hated the experience. So, you know, yeah. So look at the parts of the brain you're trying to do, and it's much easier to get people to do one new thing. Matt Flannery at Kiva, he built this great platform, does 150 million a year, and you invest $25 interest-free, and you know, through microfinancing, like some goat herder in Afghanistan to expand his herd, or a seamstress in Bolivia to get a professional sewing machine. And it works because he's trying to get them to do one new thing. Mm-hmm. If you try to get people to do behavior change, do one new thing. With SoCap, we wanted to say, look, you can invest for good. That's all we said. You know, you think you can't do it, you can do it. But we didn't try to change the idea. We had them experience the idea. So we had them, you know, act their way into a new way of thinking by seeing all these new ideas. So if you want to do behavior change, do one change. Don't do 2.
Okay, I gotcha. 2 last questions. I want to be sensitive to time here. What are your go-tos in terms of you know, whatever stack you want to put it in, Martech or Martech stack, or your sales stack? What are the first 10 tabs you open up in the morning that are more oriented towards helping one of your startups or one of your causes right now?
There's a guy named Oscar Periabello. It's a reporter for Next City. I like to see what he's up to, because he's writing about stuff that I'm working on, or writing about stuff that people like that are working on. There's not enough media around this small, local, decentralized economy that will set us free from the chains of Wall Street. So I look for anything like that. There's some things from Reuters that are a bit about that, but there's not enough. And then, you know, I'm on some listservs where people are my peers. I guess the listservs of my peers. There's an inclusive capital group. I check what they're about. But it's, you know, impact investing, there's lots of places you can go now, but I'm not really there. I'm on the bleeding edge of it, trying to do it down below the whole capital stack to friends and family, you know.
What about a hub where people that are interested, that kind of get a little bit about what you're saying, they want more of it, that want to be more involved, and a hub where they have jobs for that, or more, anything around that?
There is not at this point. We're in kind of a nascent market that isn't quite there yet. There's not really a good news source. There's not a good job board yet in this space. There is, in the things where I've been, you know, impact investing has some really good job boards, and they have hubs where people talk about things, but they all want to go to scale. I want to go down to the neighborhood level, and it's not big yet. I think it can be. We're doing an event. We're doing an event November 17th on neighborhood economics, and I think, you know, we're gathering the folks who are working at the small scale on things that could be replicable in your city and my city.
Can you do a small plug for neighborhood economics? I mean, what?
Yeah, it's neighborhood economics, November 17th, faithfinance.net. That's the URL, faithfinance.net. And we're looking at things like friends and family funding, and we're looking at things like the community investment trust, where you can keep your local businesses from being taken over by rapacious hedge funds. And it's starting out in Portland and being replicated in Seattle and Atlanta. We're looking at all these things where people can take back the economy from Wall Street. We have our network of church-based credit unions, and we're looking at just a whole lot of things like that. And that why, and we come from a place where people of faith are wanting to understand, how and why to invest in their neighbor. There's a lot of white evangelicals have been co-opted by Trump, which has just set other people of faith free to say, no, we're not about that. We will invest, in immigrants. We will invest in people of color. And so there's been a countervailing move. And so that's why we located at Faith and Finance, because, Trump was, the shallow fundamentalist white evangelicals are with Trump. All the other people of faith are not with Trump. And we're trying to build another economy where you care about your neighbor.
That's great.
November 17th, faithfinance.net.
Yeah, I don't know if you know Casey Jones out in Portland, but she's a high, top kind of probably top 5 influencer out there. She was on my show. I'll have to make an introduction. I think that would be top for her list in terms of priorities. Anyways, Kevin, it was fantastic having you on my show. Usually the only one that listens this long is my mom. So she'll probably listen to this this long, but anything else you want to promote or tell folks where to find you or anything like that?
The Faith Finance is where I'm doing a lot of writing. I have a personal blog. It's the symbioticfund.net. And those are things that are not ready for, that's where I try out new ideas before they get on the Faith and Finance. So, but yeah, you can Kevin Doyle Jones and Symbiotic Fund.
Okay.
That's where the new ideas pop up.
Okay, great. All right, and I'll fine tune this and do the final edit, and it'll be ready for on the audio side, Spotify, Apple, and 5 other platforms, and then YouTube channel for video. And I'll let you know when that's ready before we put it out there.
All right, thanks, Eric. Good to see you. Good to talk.
Yeah.
Bye.
Talk to you soon.